Hi, my name is Kat Knowles, and today we will be looking at and manipulating the Broadway shows dataset in order to better understand the processes behind the selection of Broadway shows in recent years. So first off, what are we looking at? For starters, in this project I used and manipulated the Broadway shows dataset in order to better understand how these properties and values are applied in real-world situations. More specifically, I looked at the aspects and statistics of these Broadway shows in order to figure out and better understand the decisions that places such as marketing firms make in regard to these shows. Why is this important? By looking at the statistics and data that we have presented, marketing companies and advertising firms will have a better understanding of which shows to promote as well as how they advertise them in order to perform as well as possible. The next thing that I want to look at is abstractions. Before we talk about the specifics of this project's abstraction, however, I want to create a base understanding of what an abstraction is. In regard to data manipulation, a data abstraction is simply a way to encompass and display a large set of data in more simplified terms. A good example of a data abstraction would be a data map. More specifically to my project, though, the abstraction that I created includes many real-world properties and entities. The entity that I studied in this dataset is the list of real-life Broadway shows all the way up through the year 2016. The specific keys that make up this dictionary set include day, full, month, and year, all of which make up the date key in the main dictionary, while the name, theater, and type keys make up the show key in the main dictionary as well. Finally, the attendance, capacity, gross potential, and performances keys make up the statistics key in the main dictionary. All of these keys come together to form the main dictionary, which represents the data included in the Broadway shows dataset. The next aspect of this data manipulation that I would like to look at is limitations. But, similarly to the previous slide, before discussing what limitations are included in this dataset, it is important to first define what a limitation is. For the purposes of this project, a limitation is any factor that inhibits or limits the complete study of the data presented. Now that we know what a limitation is, we can start to define and understand the limitations that are included in this presentation. The biggest limitation that arose from my study of this data is that not all of the months are included in the month key under state. Only months 1 through 8, which are January through August, are included in this dataset, which provides us with an unclear picture of the year as a whole when studying the data. Other limitations with this data include the fact that there might be too much recorded data. This can become a problem when looking at the answers to certain questions because if there's too much data, then the question may not be able to be clearly understood. There's also the problem of the category of show type being too broad. For instance, under show type, there is a category labeled special, but we are never given the terms that qualify this show as special. To the left is the abstraction that I created, which is a data map, in order to better understand this dataset as a whole. To answer my questions, I used the month and year keys under the category of date, the type key under the category of show, and then the attendance and gross keys under the category of statistics. While I was studying this dataset, I came up with 3 questions that also pertain to others who plan to study this dataset. The first question I asked is, in which months are gross ticket sales the highest? This question is important because by looking at this aspect of the data, marketing companies will be able to better understand when the consumer is actually buying theater tickets, which means that they will then know when best to push ticket sales in order to perform well. The next question that I asked was, which show type sees the most average attendance? By discovering which show type has the best average attendance rate, theaters and their producers will be able to better judge which types of shows to produce in order to see the best attendance rates. Finally, the third question I asked is, what is the trend in ticket sales over the last 10 years? This question is important because by gaining a better understanding of ticket sales over the past 10 years, we might be able to notice a pattern in the data. If the pattern is an upwards trend in ticket sales over the past 10 years, then we know that the theaters included in this data set are doing well and that they can continue to produce shows just as they have been previously. If the trend is downwards, then the producers and theaters know that they have to pull back on the number of shows that they are producing. The answer to this question serves as a diagnostic tool for the theaters to see how they've been doing in a long-term time frame. Here we see that I used the bar chart form to answer my first question about gross ticket sales in regards to the month. By looking at this visualization, we can see that the top 3 months for ticket sales are April, May, and June. With this information, individual theaters will be able to better understand which months should receive more marketing exposure, as well as which months are underperforming in regard to ticket sales. By being able to tailor marketing strategies and season rosters more closely to consumer patterns, these companies will begin to see even more progress and success with their respective theaters than they would have previously. Once again, we can see that I've utilized the bar chart form to answer my second question, which show type sees the most average attendance? By gaining a better understanding to this question, theaters will be able to better gauge which types of shows that they need to produce in order to perform well. For instance, if people stop attending plays, then the theater company would have to stop producing plays because they would then be losing money due to lack of attendance. In this example, it is clear that musicals see the most average attendance, which means that if a theater wants to continue to do well, the majority of the shows that they produce should be musicals instead of plays or special shows. In order to answer my last question, I utilized the form of a line graph to show a trend in ticket sales so as to gain a better picture of how ticket sales are doing in a long-term setting. This is important because by looking at the general trend over the past 10 years, we were able to gain a more broad idea of the theater atmosphere at the moment. And this can, in turn, help people such as producers to make decisions about how many shows to take on for that upcoming season. Because we can see an upwards trend in ticket sales over the past 10 years, it is evident that theater is still a pastime that the public is interested in, more so now than ever before if we look at the graph, which means that the consumers will continue to purchase tickets, which also means that the theaters can continue to do well and to thrive. When studying any data set, there are also going to be people who are affected by the outcomes of the study. The study of these impacts is often referred to as the study of social impacts. When looking at the social impacts of this data set, there are a few components to consider. Obviously, we have the social impacts themselves that are important to study, but we also have to take the stakeholders into account. A stakeholder is simply a person or group who has interest in and or is affected by the decisions and aspects of another group. In this project, some of the possible stakeholders include theaters, marketing companies, show producers, and ticketing offices. The possible impacts that studying this data can have on the stakeholders, however, are numerous. The first impact on the stakeholder would be in how the theater's marketing companies advertise and market ticket sales. If one month consistently sees better ticket sales than others, marketing companies would want to advertise more often in those months than in the months that do not see as much gross sales. Similarly, this data also helps to conclude that the marketing done in the months that do not see as much gross sales, such as February and March, should not have a lot of advertising because these months are not selling tickets well anyways. Another possible impact of this data set would be on the actual theaters and theater owners themselves. Based on which show types see the most average attendance, the theaters and their owners can make more informed decisions about which types of shows they want to produce in the upcoming season. If a theater company picks to do a show that does not see much average attendance, then they know they will most likely lose money because there aren't as many people attending those shows. Finally, ticketing offices themselves would be impacted by this data because in order to figure out when they need to staff the most people, they have to know how ticket sales are going to look at any given point in time. In conclusion, studying this data will lead to crucial discoveries as to both how the overall theater market is performing, as well as how to improve it in any way that we can. Thank you for watching.